So I'm inclined to copy Tristan and say that you're my father, and that's the basis of our relationship here.
Thank you.
But no, you and I met in 2012 on a phone call, an interview discussing for Architectural Digest a house that you had designed beautifully in Dea in Mallorca.
Yeah.
And before that article made it out on the newsstand in Architectural Digest, your partner, James Costos, had been appointed ambassador to Spain, a U.S. ambassador to Spain and Andorra by President Obama.
Casual, yeah.
Yeah. So then the next house you were going to design in Spain would actually be for the two of you and at a very prominent address.
Yes.
I guess I just wanted to know, how did that, before we get into how that landed, maybe it would be good for you to tell us a bit, because you grew up in California.
I grew up in California. First, I want to say an Agatha de la Prada story. I'm so sorry to deviate, but so when I first arrived in Madrid, in this very official embassy thing, and I'm in a car that has very small windows because it's armored, and I look over at a stoplight and I see this incredible scene. It's a woman wearing a parka with hearts all over it. She has sunglasses and a pink motorcycle helmet, and she's holding a chihuahua. And I said to the driver, "Who the fuck is that?" And of course it was Agatha, who is a dear friend and very much the spirit. She is. You are a fried egg through and through. You live as you design, and you're a great asset to all of us, and it's certainly the star of Madrid. So I just want to say how much I love you and how much I love that. Sorry, I just had to. The chihuahua kept coming up in my head. Go on, seriously. Okay.
So your childhood in California.
My childhood.
Do you think your early life had
that I was a Spanish royal as a child in my last life?
Well, but I mean,
Yeah.
so you come with James for those what are theoretically going to be 4 years.
Yeah.
12 years later, you've had three more houses in Spain.
Yeah.
And you and I are working on a book about
Yes.
that experience and that life and your lifestyle here.
Yeah. So my childhood. So I grew up in a funny place to grow up for anything cultural, which is Newport Beach, California. There's many of you here today, I'm sure. But what was interesting about Spain, and I think what you're alluding to, is that you're seeing stuff, my sort of Spanish houses kind of behind me on the screen. But when I was a child, Spanish stuff really was always around me. You know, every place, I mean, Santa Ana, Mission Viejo, like all these sort of Spanish names. And I grew up, you know, my family is a funny family, but half of my family was in California for a very long time. So my mother and my uncle have Spanish names, which is kind of weird, having nothing to do with anything but being from sort of old California family. And I think that familiarity or that immersion is something that I was highly aware of, but not in the way that I connected it to Spain, right? So, you know, we always tell the story that when you're in fourth grade in California, you make a sugar cube model of a California mission. So always, I mean, there's this huge, crazy circle of having to be upset or be schooled on Father Serra, who clearly brought the missions to California. And then later in my life, going with actually, bizarrely, the King Queen of Spain to the burial site of Father Serra on this big California swing that we were fortunate enough to be asked to accompany the King Queen on. And so that weird circle is wacky, because it's sort of like, wow, it's like, you know, I guess nobody wanted to see my fourth grade model of the sugar cubes.
Which mission was it?
What?
Which mission?
I did Sona Capistrano, because it's what I love the most, and it's so close to where I grew up, and that was a beautiful, like that was the whole thing. So it's weird that all the things, like there were railings I remember as a child, which are particularly sort of Mallorquin, right? There's a flat kind of railing that's particular to Mallorca. I had no idea. I thought it was like a railing of a thing, but it connected the dots later in life, which is very strange. So it's like you realize to much of the Latin world, Spain is the mothership, but for California, it seems like it's an abstract thing, but it is absolutely there, absolutely present.
Okay.
Okay.
And so now it's 2013, and you arrive, you've seen Agatha.
The Chihuahua. Yeah.
And what, I'm guessing that, you know, while the announcement for the rest of us, it seemed sudden. I'm guessing you had some time to think about it in advance.
Yes, I did.
Did you do any homework? Did you do any preparation? And then,
Well, I took, so it's a very funny story. So I could spend hours explaining how the post of becoming ambassador works and all the stuff, which is weird and hilarious and crazy. But it was we kind of knew early on. I had been asked to do the White House 4 years before, which was how this sort of watershed occurred. And we became very involved in politics as a result, and as a result, becoming an ambassador for James was sort of we had no idea this was possible, right? It seemed like such a weird thing. And James would say to me, well, we'll go to Malta, we'll take Malta. And I'm like, I'm not taking Malta, we're not going to Malta, or he'll, whatever he thought was a great idea. And when it came down the rumor chain that we were going to Spain, it was so crazy. And, as our friend George Stephanopoulos, who's our neighbor and our great friend in New York, said, wow, when you hear it, it's an abstract, but when you hear Spain, like that's the Armada Spain, that's the Empire Spain, that's the Philippine Spain. It was kind of this insane idea, right? And to also have really the first high-profile European post that went to a gay couple, which was wild, was also interesting. But again,
to a very Catholic country.
Very Catholic country, but also a country that had, I think, the second country to have marriage equality after Denmark or something. So it was a really interesting idea. So I, of course, go into hyperdrive like I do on everything and researched every possible thing. And then in a very funny thing, my friend Caroline Irving, who is here today, she and I took a secret trip to Spain. Because in the old days, when ethics were a big thing, at the State Department, you could not go near your country while you were in play. The idea was that if you were too eager or you seemed like you were, counting your chickens, someone in the Senate could kill you, right? So I had to take this secret trip, and it was because I'm so obsessive and detailed obsessive, sometimes to a fault. I had to figure out how far it was from like the airport to the house and all this stuff. And Carolina came with me, and we have a bunch of funny stories because a number of people in the design world wanted to know why I was here. Like, why are you here? Why are you here? I'm sure they're terrified that all of you are going to move here and do all the work in Spain. But so there was a lot of very funny exchanges, and because I clearly couldn't tell anyone why I was here. And so people would say to me, well, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, my boyfriend is being transferred here, was my big thing, right? Anyway, so, but it was very interesting, and I got the lay of the land, and sort of the rest is history. But the one thing that I did, because I had to jump because of the White House, and everyone was scared of me at the State Department, thank you, which was great, I managed to do a lot of the decoration of the house before I came, in terms of backgrounds, which was great. I hadn't been in the house, but I got to change out stuff. Like this is a factor of almost all embassies, no money, no, whatever, and sort of protocols of how you do things. So our mattress was 14 years old. And there was no way I was going to sleep on a 14-year-old mattress. So I got to change the mattress. I got to do a lot of stuff in advance and pick the art, which was a huge thing, and I didn't realize at the time, but in the 60s when Mrs. Kennedy started Art in Embassies, this big promotional thing, which became a huge thing if you talk to lots of art collectors in much of the world, the first place they ever saw American art was an American embassy, right? If you talk to Patty Cisneros, who is from Venezuela, who's one of the great Latin American art collections, she'll tell you the first place I ever saw a Rothko thing was in the American Embassy in Venezuela. So it's a huge thing. So we had the largest program that ever existed, and brought to Spain, and it was incredible. And I didn't even realize at the time things that I thought would be impactful would turn out to be such a big thing in Spain, right? My life is very much like an easy bake oven. I never know what, I might think it's nothing putting in, but when it comes out, it's somehow, I didn't even realize that it would take such a form of its own.
Transformed.
So I was able to do a bunch of stuff in advance.
And I've lived here for 23 years, and I think that's 6 or 7 ambassadors. You and James definitely turned up the volume to 11 in terms of opening the embassy and entertaining.
Right.
Did you have a particular goal? I mean, did you see that as a, you know, the embassy, the physical structure of it, the design of it, the art, and entertainment? I mean, I remember one very early on in your tenure, you served baked Virginia ham in Spain, which I don't know how much ham they've pushed in front of you in your few days here, but ham is not, you know, ham is not cooked; it's cured, and it's, you know, it's like Queen Isabel la Católica. It's like an emblem of Spain. So to push a plate of, you know, baked Virginia ham with a maple glaze on it. But everyone loved it. I mean, everyone loved it.
And this is so my thing. So I snuck it in my luggage, which was interesting. A lot of hams. It was like a couple trips. But I researched like the best, most artisanal Virginia ham. I mean, I think the thing that's interesting, I mean, look, I think everyone who's in this room shares a kind of curiosity and a kind of sense of history and a sense of problem solving, right? Which is why we're creatives, why everyone is sort of together in the space. But I think what's weird is that I think that all of this stuff, really working on the White House, became a kind of distillation process for me to be that, look, when I started at the White House, things like the carpet for former presidents had been inadvertently made in China, or things that would show up would not be, you know, there's thought, but I think that what it really honed into me, and a lot of it had to do with just the style and the focus of the Obamas, but was that everything had to be a thing. Everything had to be thoughtful. Everything had to be for a reason. And I think that doing that for a long period of time and realizing that what we're doing is, look, there's two things that occur in embassies, right? One is, I deserve this, this is my reward, which happens to a lot of, you know, there are people who are lifetime sort of diplomats who get various posts, but the grand posts generally go to people who are somehow connected to the president. They're either, you know, whatever. And in our case, I think that some people perceive it as their reward, and I'm going to go live this wonderful life. Ours was very much about public service, as most Obama people were, if not all. And I think what came about was we wanted to do things which were deeply thoughtful and impactful, as pure as we could in the sense of promoting the U.S. And so this idea of, look, in a country that is famous for its ham, well, we have ham, and we're going to bring you Virginia ham, right? And it happened to coincide with the trip by Martha Stewart, who we brought to Spain, and you know the dozens and dozens of people we brought to Spain. But it was really a desire to do things which I perceived were super old school, right? Which is, this was the job. The job was to really promote the U.S. and to promote this relationship. What's funny is, any of you have watched The Diplomat, it's so off base because the idea of a diplomat, it's hilarious. The idea of a diplomat having anything to do with the internal politics of the country, like, we would be in jail if we did that. Like, shut down. There's a scene in, I think, the first season. James is like, I'm not watching this anymore. But it was like, literally, the Kerry Russell turns to an aide and says, shut down this hospital, right? I mean, can you imagine? I mean, in Madrid, it's like, oh yeah, shut down this hospital. And it's like, and we're in jail. And we're in jail. Yeah. So it's a joke. But the idea of it, and I think what was also incredible is, look, we came to this country when President Obama had the highest rating of any leader in history in Spain. No American president had been to this country in, I think, 14 or 16 years. Mrs. Obama came with the girls. President Obama came independently. I mean, we had the greatest run of any, you know, at the greatest time. It was the end of what had been a very big financial crisis in Spain. And so everything was new and had opportunity. And we were fortunate enough to be maybe a little bit of a novelty too. But believe me, whatever, you know, I was all in. And to your point, it was a really wonderful time to you know, I think if we did it now or we did it in a different way, it would have been different. It was a very fortunate time.
In 2017, you left the embassy residence, but you didn't leave Madrid.
No, I didn't leave Madrid.
And I remember talking to you at the time. You had three possibilities of where the contents of the embassy residence were going to go. But they stayed in Madrid. They went to an apartment that you rented.
Yeah.
And I remember spiraling back to that first house in Mallorca when we first talked. Like the apartment you rented, was a project of pure decoration. In your word, the artful deployment, or the deliberate deployment of fabrics, furniture, colors, and objects. And you said something at one point that was something that you really enjoyed every once in a while, where you don't redesign the house, you don't reconfigure.
Well, it's the worst. Everybody knows it's the worst. Nobody wants to do renovation or. That was funny because you know well the scene. So we're in the embassy. There's clearly this is President Trump's first administration, and it was abrupt. We had to go back to Washington to which we bizarrely left on Air Force One, which is a whole other story. Left Washington, and the Obamas came to stay with us in California. When they left the White House, which is both as a history buff, like brain explosive, but also just we're so close to them, so it was great and easy. But James came out of his bathroom, which I've told you a story, with all these unopened shampoo bottles, and he was white, and he said to me, "What are we going to do with all of our stuff?" Right? So it was like, oh God. So quickly, as you know, we rented this apartment. There's a policy, old school policy, that you're not supposed to stay in your country. Like when you're out, you're sort of out. So we were relatively undercover for a long period of time. There was no real ambassador in Spain in the Trump years for the first year and a half. So we sort of laid low, as was sort of protocol. But we had, in my crazy obsessive process of buying, we had 11 sets of dishes, we had all this stuff. We gave, as you know, most of the soft furnishings as a donation to the embassy, to the State Department, because it was like we'd done it all, and what was I going to do with it? But also it felt like the right thing to do. And so we took the furniture and the art, which was ours, and yeah, as you said, we moved into an apartment that had been done by the same architect who'd renovated the embassy. So sort of 10 years before. So what was great is all the light switches were the same, all the heating and air conditioning. I mean, it was familiar. And it was a very beautiful and well-designed space, so it was really easy to just adapt it to move into. So it was great.
And how did you, because I don't know, in the photos, there are a few objects. There's a Coromandel screen. There's some Chinese wallpaper panels. There are a few objects.
Holdovers, yeah.
Holders. Well, I was going to say treasured objects.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
one great thing about your homes here is that they never feel like a pied-à-terre or
Right.
a bolt hole or a getaway. It's like where you furnish it just on the fly. They have things that you brought from California that you loved and that you had before and that you'll have, for a long time. How did you transition those objects? Because the Coromandel screen in particular was, at the embassy, was kind of a backdrop for sometimes dignitaries and visits and things like that.
Right.
And then you moved it into a more intimate space. Did you have a strategy for knocking down the?
No, I mean, I think that, some stuff went into storage. There was some stuff that's still in storage, a decade later, which is expensive and stupid, but still stuff I don't want to get rid of. Their huge panels, which are used in the embassy. There you see our apartment, the first apartment with the Coromandel screen in it. But those are things, I mean, that screen had followed me around for a long time. It had been in our apartment in New York. It had been around for a long time. So it wasn't hard. I think, look.
This is all the apartment.
This is all the apartment. It's kind of what I do, so I kind of wasn't super hard to do. And then I have a group of people who still work for me and work with me here, and my friends we have a showroom in Madrid and an office in Madrid, and so that made it extraordinarily, much easier. So, but no, it was an interesting moment. It felt like I don't know what I was thinking, what I thought I would do with 11 sets of dishes in Madrid after I was done. It was sort of not really long-range thinking, but I have a lot of dishes.
Yeah.
Still, if any of you want them, I sell them off.
Okay, so after I think it was like 5 or 6 years, you decided, like every savvy designer, that you can renovate somebody else's apartment or you can create your own.
They wouldn't sell the apartment that we had, to be fair. So, but it was also a little small.
I remember Thanksgivings where people were eating on all the
On my
beds.
bed,
On the
yeah,
beds,
on
yeah.
the beds, yeah. Yeah.
So I remember on a couple of occasions going to see apartments with you.
Well, your husband is my great real estate advisor. Yes.
He's the Michael Whisperer on real estate advice. And then you found probably, I know you looked at a 17th century palace in the center, in the historical center of Madrid,
Yeah.
and some very glam apartments. But you found then something that offered you which you hadn't seen yet.
Yeah. Well, we bought an apartment which was a crazy historic apartment, but that had been stripped down by a Spanish artist had bought it and kind of stripped it down. And it was, look, the thing is, I think what happened for me was we tried to buy this palace in the old part of Madrid, this floor of a palace, which is beautiful, and we should have probably bought. But all my friends were like, it's great, it's amazing, we'll never come visit you, because there's no place to park in that part of Madrid. So that was kind of a deal breaker. But so I had in my head, having lived here, and I think all of you who are visiting, you'll sort of leave with this, which is there's so much here, right? There's so much beautiful stuff and so much history and so much architecture. And then when you travel all over Spain, which we have been fortunate to do, there's even more. It's like, it's a crazy thing. I mean, I think savvy travelers know every restaurant in a 5-mile, kind of circle of every major town in Italy. Spain, that's not the case. I always say Spain is like charting unknown water. It's like the deep sea or something. It's just never been charted, right? It's like there's so much stuff. So I had this in my head. I had a bit of a Spanish greatest hits album. And so for me to find this blank space, I'm just laughing because it was so preposterous, was this opportunity to kind of recreate these Spanish rooms that I was so obsessed with. Then when you're seeing pictures of Mallorca, Mallorca became the country version of that. So I had this multi-year period of basically recreating these immersive experiences I've had in all these great houses of Spain, which is kind of hilarious. So, the funny thing is, maybe in New York, in Madrid, it was a little over the top. My mother, who's a witch, who I love, came to Madrid and said, "Oh, darling, your apartment's so wonderful. Where's the throne room?" So, which I took as a bench of success. But, I think the interesting thing is when you've lived here or spent time here, as you have so much of, you really become into, Spanish aesthetic is very different than French or English or whatever. There's a kind of go for it. There's a kind of exuberance that exists that is, it's kind of all, it's like lush. Gusto, it's all in, it's all, it's like, if it's gold, let's make it golder. If it's blue, let's make it bluer. And I think that aesthetic, which when you're immersed in it, it's kind of overwhelming. I mean, Spain, for much of our history, world history, was the richest country in the world. And so there's a hat on a hat, generally, right? And so I think that my apartment is definitely a hat on a hat, basically, yeah.
So in Mallorca, you wanted, I mean, as a Californian, as somebody from Newport Beach, you do not have a sea view.
No.
There was an intentional move into the interior of the island
for security,
for a country estate.
Yes, yeah.
And every time we go back, there's another corner of the garden, and some of them are in these photos that you have carved out for entertaining.
Yes.
Do you get to use the house year round?
I mean, the reality of it is Spain, I think, both apartment and Mallorca are designed and built for a life I wish I had, right? I think, and maybe, I will have at one point, but I don't spend enough time. I mean, James spends more time in Spain than I do. But it's hard. I think all of you in the room, I mean, work is harder and harder and harder in terms of travel and time and stuff. And so I think, I was in Doha for 18 hours 4 days ago. It's just very hard to find time to have the life I wish I had, right? So I think so much of where creative people paint or write or whatever, I think I design for myself rooms that are evocative of a life I wish I had. Rocking chairs that don't get used. I mean, it did not literally, but the idea is that. And I think it's just a way of, I mean, I'm sure some of you do this. It's like Idealista, which is the version of Zillow, basically in Spain, is between the two, it's like what I do all night, when I can't sleep, is look at real estate that I don't want to buy, that I have no interest in getting, but in houses, in places that make no sense to me to buy. But that's
the fantasy draws you in.
Right. So that's very much, but I actually got to execute it here because there was enough reason to execute it here. But yeah, it's my needlework, if you will.
And so you.
I like these swivelly chairs.
I know. I thought they were going. I thought they were going to be.
It's very Dick Cavett show.
In terms of both Madrid, Mallorca, Spain, culturally, artistically, I mean, what are the things that draw you and that surprised you, for example, in terms of?
I mean, the thing that's weird, and you know this because you live here too, the thing about Madrid, which I hope all of you leave with, is I had sort of factored everything about moving to Spain in terms of I knew, all these things. I never knew how much I would fall in love with this city. It's the most beautiful walking city, and so when I would come, because I was clearly still operating my office, my stuff in LA when James was ambassador. So I was literally FedExing myself a couple times a month here and broken down at the end and would go home and start over again. But my deal with him was we had to walk every weekend on a 3-hour walk across the city. And which was crazy. And, and then we had all the security and cars and stuff, so it was a drama, but it was my deal, and he tried to Welsh on it every time, and I was like, that's our deal. But if you walk through all the various neighborhoods of Madrid, it's beautiful. It's a magical place, and the people of Madrid, I can't say enough about how wonderful and how warm and engaging they are, and how just purely charming they are. And the thing that is so extraordinary is how many, there's the cape maker, they only make capes. There's the espadrille maker, they only make espadrilles. There's that which exists. It's still one of the only places in the world, though there's plenty of Gucci and things, but there is still local stuff that is not exportable, and I think that does not exist in most capitals in Europe. It's been all sort of institutional or internationalized in a way that doesn't exist. So it's particularly Spanish. And I think that that's something that's really magical. And I think it's hard to understand as an abstract idea, but compared to most capitals, it's still the most distilled, has a sense of place in a way that can be off-putting to people who come here because it's not open the way like a Barcelona is or whatever, but it's quite magical. I mean, listen, I always arrive thrilled that I'm here. The sky is always clear in Spain, in Madrid particularly, no matter how cold it is. And I think I always leave wanting to stay longer. And I think that's something that's really magical about the place. And hopefully all of you will come back, and because you're here such a brief amount of time, but it's a pretty wonderful place that continually reveals itself to you in that way.
It does. I mean, and it's changed a lot, but it hasn't lost its Spanishness. It hasn't lost its essence.
Great.
And there are stores. A great place for gift shopping, if you have to take souvenirs back, is hardware stores.
They're the best.
They sell amazing ceramic cookware. They sell them some of the handiest things and really beautiful objects of real beauty.
Yeah. No, it's still a place that many people, many merchants, whatever, care about something, not distribution, not whatever. There's a craft and a kind of qualitative focus, which is great.
Okay. And this morning we talked briefly about Diana Vreeland's Style Points Spain. So in the 48 seconds we have left,
can't we go over like a minute? We can steal Agatha's extra minute.
Extra minute.
Yeah.
Just are there any images for Madrid or for Mallorca, things that really
style
get to you?
Points? I think it's very interesting. I mean, there's certain things that always stand out to me about Spain specifically, but I think if you go to all the museums, if you look at the focus, there's so much black in Spanish. The Spanish understand black very well. right? So that's one thing. I think that, again, the walking is critical. I think the museums are the most extraordinary museums in the world. I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about the Prado, which is, you know, the only museum in the world where nothing was stolen, nothing was taken by a conquering army, everything was paid for, which is kind of amazing. And then if any of you have an opportunity to go to the Royal Collection, which is like a trip, it's the most interesting collection because it talks about the two royal families that controlled Spain, and it's sort of the best of what the Royal Collection has, and it's unbelievable. Everything from Franco's car to Goya's and Velázquez and the designs of the palaces and things. I mean, it's quite amazing. And I think that it's overwhelming and it's also overwhelming to think that Madrid will give you everything Spain has. You do have to go to Sevilla, you have to go to a few other places to get the full immersion of it. But yeah, I think there's kind of stuff everywhere. There's stuff everywhere, on the streets, everywhere. Are we over? We're over?
We're great. We're 54 seconds. So,
are we
thank
okay?
you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Tight ship. Tight ship.